You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the most recent two episodes, Dot and Bubble and Rogue.
They're almost the last two.
I know, we get two more. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hey, Father Corey.
How's it going?
Very well. And Jimmy Aiken. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, before we get started, I want to tell you about a way to get your very own Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt. This is not a Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt. This is a Secrets of Middle-earth t-shirt. But you can get a Secrets of Doctor Who t-shirt or other merch by visiting our merch store at sqpn.com/merch. We have a lot of listener feedback, which we're going to be splitting up in this episode. But stay tuned for that in the middle and the end of the episode. And also, I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy called Pray Station Portable. That's an opportunity to pray with the whole church, the Divine Office or Liturgy of the Hours. And you can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/PSP. So first up, we're discussing Dot and Bubble. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of Dot and Bubble?
This week, the Doctor and Ruby go to Find Time, which is an outpost of civilization on an otherwise uninhabited world. But Find Time is a Black Mirror social media hell world that is filled with super rich, super spoiled, super snobbish, super white rich kids who only work 2 hours a day and wear pastel colors and lip gloss. Each one has a Dot, a small AI robotic drone that projects a social media bubble hologram around their heads. And they're so dependent on the dots and bubbles that they don't know how to function without them, so they never turn them off. And that prevents them from seeing that Find Time has been invaded by giant carnivorous slugs who are eating them alive. The Doctor and Ruby invade the social media bubble of a young woman named Lindy Pepperbean and try to figure out what's going on because they can't get into Find Time. And they try to help Lindy escape the giant carnivorous slugs, which only seem to eat some people and not others. They manage to get Lindy down to a lower level of the city, and she's aided in this effort by the super popular social media heartthrob influencer, Ricky September. The goal is to get them down to an underground river so they can escape Find Time, but the Doctor makes 4 horrible discoveries. First, the slugs are eating the Find Timers in alphabetical order, which means that they're designed by someone. Second, Lindy Pepperbean is the next to be eaten. Third, the designers of the slugs are the Dots, who have grown to hate the Find Timers because of their inane, vapid, constant social media chatter. And fourth, the Dots are perfectly capable of killing the Find Timers on their own without the slugs. Since there are no slugs nearby to eat Lindy, her own Dot turns on her and tries to kill her. Ricky September defends her, but Lindy callously tells the Dot that Ricky's real last name is Coombs, which comes before Pepperbean, so it needs to kill him first, and it does. This buys Lindy the time to escape down to the river, where she and the other escapees meet the Doctor and Ruby. Their plan is to colonize the rest of the world outside Find Time, but the Doctor knows that they're so inexperienced they'll never survive. So he offers to take them all to a new safe home in the TARDIS. But they're so super spoiled and super snobbish that they won't consider going with the Doctor since he's not one of them. And they depart on a riverboat, leaving the Doctor horrified and leaving Ruby in shock. The end.
Father Corey, your overall impression?
I liked about 90% of this episode. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was very suitably creepy and showed the perils of social media and being, the self-centered and the super rich and all these great themes. And it was just, I really enjoyed it. And you had the contrast of the bright colors, Jimmy mentioned like the pastel clothing and stuff like that. And the horror of the people literally just getting eaten alive and they didn't realize it until it was too late. And it was, I really all enjoyed all that. The ending really, really felt tacked on. It felt like we got a message we want to make sure it gets explicitly put, so we're going to make sure we put it here. So like I said, I liked about 90% of it. If the ending was done just a tiny bit different, it wouldn't have taken much. It would have been a great episode. It still is a good episode. It's just the ending kind of ruined.
Jimmy, how about you? Your overall impression?
Yeah, I figured the ending would be divisive. I liked the episode and I liked the ending. We have this progressive revelation of just how vapid and worthless Lindy Pepperbean is as a character. And we're kind of rooting for her, like the Doctor and Ruby are. They're trying to help her, and the audience is on the Doctor and Ruby's side. So we want to see Lindy come out of this okay. And then she kills Ricky September. And it's like, okay, we're not coming back from that in the last 5 minutes. There needs to be some kind of horrible comeuppance for her as a character, and given the arc of this episode, and having her and the other survivors all go off to die, not realizing it when the Doctor could take him somewhere. I found that satisfying. Now there are a couple of things about that I have questions about. One of them is, this is not like Doctor Who was in Classic Who, where the Doctor didn't really have control of the TARDIS. Now he can go anywhere he wants. If it was Classic Who, then it would be perfectly understandable why the Doctor could, he could tell him, this is a one-time offer. I can't come back here. You either come with me now or you don't. And that would underscore the gravity of their decision to remain. But now the Doctor has control of the TARDIS, and he could wait a week and come back when they've started to suffer the effects of trying to be these new pioneers and make the offer again. And they don't do that. So I thought that was something that could have stood with a little more development of why he doesn't just come back once they've had a chance to experience what it's like living outside of Fine Time. The other question I had was whether their refusal, because what they say is they're not going to go with him because he's not one of us. And that could mean one of two things. That could mean the Doctor's black, or it could mean you're not one of the super rich. And so watching it the first time, both alternatives occurred to me. And, we talked about how, like, the Chris Chibnall episode, Rosa, was just way too on the nose. And we've got this space racist for no reason. This was vast. If this is meant to be racism as opposed to classism, it was super, super subtle. And I can praise that in that, okay, thank you for not hitting it on the nose so hard, but I think you could have hit it a little bit harder to make it clear which of those alternatives you meant us to understand. And I've seen British people comment on it both ways. Some people took it as racism, some people took it as classism, and they do have a more class-oriented society in England than we do here in America. So I think it could be read either way. My guess is it's probably meant to be racism, but I think if that's what's meant, you could have hit it a little bit harder, made it a little more explicit.
Yeah, my wife, Melanie, didn't catch the racism thing. She thought it was classism. For me, I felt like it was more racism because everybody in Fine Time is white, just lily white.
Yeah.
And her "I'm not going with you" was directed more toward the Doctor and less toward Ruby. She seemed more amenable to Ruby. But you're right, it wasn't, I'm not coming with you because of your color or your race. So it was a little subtler than that. But it did feel tacked on. Go ahead.
I do want to give Russell T Davies points for some subtlety here. I just think that's good. You don't, as Mark Twain said, fiction must never preach overtly. It must always preach covertly. Yeah. And so, I want to give him credit for being subtle about it. I think he was just a little too subtle, so the message was harder to discern.
Right.
And
to make my impression, just that it felt tacked on, that there was a perfectly fine story about the dangers of being too absorbed in technology. And then we had this other thing, which was either racism or classism, but whichever it was, it felt like they didn't develop that throughout the rest of the episode. It's sort of like, and now in the final scene, here's why Lindy doesn't want to go with the Doctor. And it's like, that's kind of extra.
They did seed it actually, there are 3 or 4 points earlier in the episode where there are clues. Once you know the ending, if you go back and watch it, you can see how she's reacting to him. Like when he first appears, she immediately swipes him off the screen.
Right.
But then she's willing to talk to Ruby.
Right.
And later, when she learns about the slugs, she's like, do they have something to do with you? And there are a few little bitty hints like that, but it is very subtle.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And that's why I immediately made the conclusion it was, this was a racist ending. And that's the part that I say was tacked on. Because if they had kept it where they, yes, you're not a fine timer. You're not one of us rich, entitled, self-absorbed people. So therefore, we don't want anything to do with you. But when they talk about, we can't travel with you, you're contaminated by being with you. This was more language of racism than it was, again, like one you said, she was at least willing to tolerate Ruby, and when she was going, can you just answer these questions for me? Because she looks like Ruby. Ruby looks like her,
right?
That kind of thing. So, I know other people have come with this. You look online, you look on even on our SQPN Discord, people pick that out pretty quickly that it was a racist message. See people on YouTube and stuff. So if that was what Rusty T. Davies meant for it to be, it definitely hit people. There are people that got it. Many people got it. If it wasn't what he meant, then he missed on that one. If he meant it being more classist or whatever. So,
and to be clear, I'd be fine with it where that's what it was about. I just feel like it's not so much that they had to do a racism episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's fine. It's more like it just didn't feel like it fit with the rest of what they were trying to do.
If they made it about classism, then it totally fits with everything else they did in the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the ending itself, again, with setting aside the issue of why they rejected the doctor, that's just so fitting. It's like, oh yes, we're so good and we're so smart. Because of course, she kept calling everybody was stupid. Everybody was stupid. Everybody's, that was the common theme. You're so stupid. So it fit that they'd be like, oh yes, we're the smart ones. We'll be able to go out there and, be George of the jungle and, survive and build a new civilization, which of course, in a week they're, basically you've got Lost. The TV series Lost.
Or what was the book we all are reading in high school?
Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies. That's what it will be.
Yep.
I was going to make another point, but in any case, I did like the idea of what if Alexa and Facebook became sentient and hated us. Like that's a good one. That is an interesting story to tell, and I found that interesting, like how self-absorbed we can become in our phones. Like literally, the way they even shot this was like this close. Like if you're looking at the video, like right in front of the face, the camera was like a foot away. The face would fill the screen, and that's basically where a lot of people's phones are most of the time, is filling their right in their face. And it's like we have these blinders on, these technological blinders, and we don't see outside our bubble, or sometimes we call it our silo of like-minded people, and to see the world as it really is, with people who have different points of view and different ideas, and the dangers of social media is that we become siloed among people who are just like us. I think that's an interesting story to explore in a science fiction context like this, and to show the dangers, which the man trap is this. That's what I think Russell T. Davies called it in interviews or something. But these man traps are this idea of, we have these blinders on. We can end up getting, harmed by not seeing the world around us, whether literally, as we've heard stories of in the news about people walking into traffic while staring at their phone, or more metaphorically. So I thought that was really interesting.
Or driving with the Apple goggles on in AR mode.
Do not wear your Vision Pro goggles while driving, please.
I figured this was TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter all rolled into one. Because that's really what it felt like. But then again, it was surrounding you as a bubble. You could see through it, but you had to look through little slits between the different avatars.
Yeah.
Right.
So they physicalize the social media bubble as a physical bubble in this case.
Or holographic, yeah.
And even to the point, so dependent on the technology that even when like they have her, she doesn't want to leave the bubble. Like she just absolutely refuses. And then when she leaves the bubble, she can't even walk across the room.
Yeah, that popped me out of the story a little bit because I think they have not set it up in such a way to make them that dependent, because the bubble is giving them narrations. It's basically a GPS about how to turn left, turn right, go forward, this kind of stuff. Okay, yeah, but you got to know how to walk to do that. And just guiding you when you walk, it's not going to cancel your ability to walk towards a target that you can see.
Well, and I think it maybe the only reason I could accept it is the idea that she had never had to do that, where she actually had to look at the end wall and say, I want to go to that point at the end wall and do it. And that's why her center of balance was thrown off so badly. But she learned very quickly. Yeah. But it just took her time to be able to actually learn that.
When she gets to the underground conduit, she runs fairly well.
Yeah. I will say that I liked after that initial scene where she couldn't walk, where she's starting to learn to, and she's walking along the sidewalk and bumps her head twice in a lamppost. Okay, that was funny.
That was good. That was good. And then, it turns out that Ricky September, the celebrity guy who, by the interesting, Ruby Sunday, Ricky September, RS, date-related names. I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure if there's a connection there. But he's a rebel who turns off his bubble occasionally and lives outside.
And reads books.
Yeah, he actually only just gets on it long enough to post his next video and then reads books.
Yes. Another interesting aspect is their language. They substitute in their cursing. They substitute common items like land or I for God, for land's sake. That sort of thing.
By my eyes,
by my eyes. I thought it was a very interesting use of language. Not sure what they were trying to do there, but it's interesting.
It may reflect the fact that there are banned terms. In social media, like you can't say a hole, so people will say ass hat instead. Right. Or you can't say kill. You see all the time. You see make unalive. How to unalive Galactus.
Linguists are going to have a field day in the future with social media.
Well, now at the end, there was a line about, it's our God-given duty to maintain the standards of fine time. So I wonder if that was a little Russell T Davies anti-religion sliding in there too.
Oh yeah,
because he's been known for that as well.
But he has been, but I think that I don't think he's actually. Doctor Who is fairly God-friendly.
Right.
I mean, we have Christmas episodes, so. Yeah. They're not as religious as they could be, but this is a sci-fi show. Yeah. And so
more anti-institution. Yeah.
We also get another sighting of Susan Twist in this, just as you'd expect. She's Lindy's mom, Penny Pepperbean, and we see her on a video link. And for the first time, the Doctor and Ruby both get to see her, and they both recognize her.
Yep.
Right.
The Doctor points out she was the ambulance in Boom, and Ruby says, "Oh, she was this other person. I've seen her somewhere else too." So we've got that as recognition. And then when Ruby and Ricky, when Lindy and Ricky get to this communications hub, they're going to call Homeworld, where all their parents are, and Ricky dials it up and as he gets a readout of the population, it says population of Homeworld 0, and he can see a slug there.
Right.
And so this is not the first time this has happened. They've killed all of their parents.
Right. The dot is just getting around to taking out the Fine Time kids. I thought it was interesting that Fine Time itself is in a bubble, like the city of Fine Time is in a bubble. So there's little metaphorical bubbles. Lindy is she's always blaming everyone else for her problems, but she also coincidentally, and she calls other people stupid, but she calls herself stupid a lot, which I think is interesting. A little self-deprecating. I wonder, like, some people talk about how, you have to have positive self-talk, otherwise it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, as something I do all the time, where I'm like, I make a mistake, and I'm like, oh man, you were just so stupid. And it's like, no, don't negative self-talk yourself. That ends up becoming self-fulfilling.
I can see you doing the other Chris Farley. Stupid. So stupid.
stupid. Every time I do an interview, asking Paul McCartney about his getting arrested for weed. It's SNL flashbacks. But I think it's interesting. The Fine Time people seem very childlike. They're not grown-ups. In fact, she talks about how Mummy has gone to the sky as opposed to her mother has died.
And they say that the only people that are there are ages 17 to 27. So they are adults technically, but if they've lived their whole life with the dot and bubble, they probably haven't had the opportunity to actually mature in that process.
Right. They haven't faced hardship, which is ultimately one of the key things that gets you to mature.
Yeah.
And they've been living in this very pampered environment, so they've never grown up.
And we know they're the rich kids, so that doesn't help either.
Right. But Lindy it's very how do I put it? But they've learned something about the evolutionary. What am I trying to say? When Lindy throws Ricky under the bus, like she's learned the survival of the fittest is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
In the sense of when it comes down to it, she's ready to sacrifice someone else to save her own skin.
And then she lies about it. When she gets down into the river area, she says, people ask, where's Ricky? And she says, he went back. He said he had other people to save. I couldn't stop him. He was so brave. And so she's also covering up her own crime there. Ricky, by the way, I really like as a character. He is take charge. He is able to help her. I mean, he's got this weird bubble background history too, but he's largely overcome it. And he realizes, like, when he finds out the population of Homeworld is 0, he lies to Lindy about what he's discovered so that she won't worry, because he realizes how fragile she is.
Right. He's a good person. He's the one, maybe in fact, the one good person in Fine Time that we encounter. Although it's hard to say because so many of them die immediately. But that's the interesting.
It's also kind of ironic having a social media influencer who turns out, given the environment that he's thriving in, you'd think he would be the most vapid of all. With people just showering him with adulation, and he's actually not. He's the most practical person we meet.
Well, the irony is he says he puts his videos up and then turns it off, so he doesn't hear all the adulation.
Yeah.
In fact, another irony is that if he'd survived, they probably would have survived in the wilderness with his leadership. It is an interesting twist.
He would have convinced them to go with the doctor.
Right. It is an interesting twist to have the celebrity social influencer in this story about the dangers of social media to be a heroic figure. So that's kind of interesting. It has happened in the past where the doctor has kind of left people who turned out to be not worthy. In this, he's still willing to take them despite their attitudes.
I like what he says at that point. He says, you can say whatever you want. You can think whatever. I will do anything if you just allow me to save your lives.
Yeah.
And that, good. That's good writing. I love the doctor is being a grown up here. This is not Jodie Whittaker throwing a pout tantrum. This is okay. I don't care if I'm not one of you, whatever that means. I just want to save your lives. I don't care what you think of me. Just come with me now. That is good. That is mature thinking and mature writing. And I liked that Russell T Davies put that in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's interesting that scene was the first day of shooting in season 14 after the special 60th anniversary special, The Giggle.
Yep.
This was his first day of shooting. So he threw it all out there right off the bat, which was good. I thought that was a really interesting, good scene for him. There's one other interesting thing, just a little bit a little note. The doctor does use the term anti-grav instead of anti-mav. because of the whole Mavity thing that they've been doing. So it's kind of interesting that that might have been just a little flub in the writing, but
Time War.
Yeah, just the Time War. Father Corey, do you have any other notes on Dot and Bubble?
So these people in Fine Time, they would have to work, and their work was literally putting their hands on this Xbox shaped pad, and they were doing data processing. Well, it looks basically like they were, their brains were being used for data processing, and they spent the whole time just doing the bubble. And of course, that's technology that people would love to develop, where we could just basically plug into the matrix, and instead of using artificial intelligence, we use our intelligence instead. So, and of course, that was it's so boring. Just have to sit there and do the same thing they're doing all day. Anyways,
2 hours a day.
2 hours, yeah.
That was their very long work day.
Yeah, wouldn't that be terrible? And then at one point they mentioned I think it was Ricky September says something about the great abrogation, and it must be when they just set any customs, anything that came before is gone. You do only what you're told to do through the bubble.
How about you, Jimmy? Any final notes?
Well, it's not entirely obvious. It's not like the horror of Fang Rock, but just for once, everybody dies.
It's true,
including on another world.
Yeah, right. This is true. Everybody does die eventually, if not right on screen.
Yep.
That's true. All right, so that is Dot and Bubble. Before we get to our discussion of Rogue, I want to go through some listener feedback on Space Babies and Devil's Court and Boom to catch up, and then we'll have some more listener feedback after we talk about Rogue. So on Space Babies and Devil's Court, Doug's Film and TV on YouTube writes, here are my thoughts on Space Babies. I will say I do find it a weak story, but I found it entertaining. When I saw the babies in the tubes, I thought we might be dealing with clones. I think there was a good twist that the boogeyman was one of the children. He also has something on Devil's Court, but let's talk about that. Yeah.
The boogeyman's not one of the children. The boogeyman is made from the children's mucus.
Yes.
Yep.
From their literal boogies.
Yep.
And then he says, on Devil's Court, I will say this is much better than Space Babies, and we get to have the Beatles, which is awesome. I'll admit I'm not a fan of Maestro, and I didn't think it was written well. When I was watching it, the scene where Maestro is holding Ruby, I heard a familiar track, and the track was the Trickster's theme from the Sarah Jane Adventures, and I think the Trickster's the one who waits. I do like the closing song, and that was catchy. I have to mention this back in 2022, I did visit Abbey Road and saw EMI Studios, and I did cross the crossing, and no, there is no music from the crossing, which is disappointing. They should add that.
Yeah. So a lot of people noticed the Trickster theme, and there's been a lot of speculation about the Trickster. For people who may not know, the Trickster is an antagonist that appeared in the Sarah Jane Adventures, and he was kind of a recurrent antagonist. He's been mentioned in Doctor Who. He was mentioned, for example, in Turn Left. The telepathic beetle that was on Donna's back was said to be one of the Trickster's minions. My suspicion is that the Trickster may be connected with all this, but I doubt that the Trickster is the one who waits. The Trickster doesn't feel epic enough for me to be the one who waits, given what the toy maker said about him. But that's my guess.
Part of the pantheon of Discord, and so maybe somebody at the top of the pantheon. Okay, and then on Boom, Doug, the same Doug of Doug's Film and TV, says, good review of Boom. I will say I do love Boom, and this is Ncuti Gatwa's best story as the Doctor and of Series 14. It was good to have Stephen Moffat back, and I was a teen when his era came in 2010. I will admit, I am a fan of his era, and seeing that story, he still got it.
Yep.
Jason Manuel also writes, 3 out of 5 episodes so far have something go wrong when the Doctor or Ruby steps on something. In the Devil's Court, they unexpectedly start playing music by stepping on the crosswalk. Therefore, this season is about watching where you step. I will add that in Space Babies, Ruby also steps on the butterfly and something goes wrong. So that's 4 out of 5 of those.
Although I don't know that I'd characterize it as something going wrong when they step on the crosswalk, because that's part of the Close in Bollywood number.
Yeah, exactly. Something unexpected happens is more likely.
Yeah.
then, and so that's it for feedback so far. We'll have more feedback at the end of our discussion of Rogue when we'll talk about feedback on 73 Yards. So that brings us to that discussion. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of Rogue?
This week, the 15th Doctor and Ruby are at a posh country house party in 1813. There, the Doctor meets a bounty hunter named Rogue, and unfortunately, it's love at first sight because, of course, it is. Rogue is tracking down a member of a bird-like shape-shifting race called the Chulder, who are killing humans and taking on their appearances as a form of cosplay. It turns out that there are multiple Chulder, and they're planning to kill everyone in the country house, then everyone in London, and then everyone in the world, because of course they are. The Doctor reprograms Rogue's devices to banish the Chulder to a random barren dimension where they can't hurt anybody. But there is a plot complication, because it looks like Ruby has been killed and replaced by one of the Chulder, but then it turns out that she actually, when the Chulder are trapped and about to be banished, it turns out that it really is Ruby. Rogue saves the day by knocking Ruby out of the trap and taking her place, and the Doctor regretfully pushes the button to banish them. Rogue tells the Doctor to find him, but afterwards the Doctor tells Ruby this would be almost impossible, leaving him lovelorn. The end.
Father Corey?
I'll say the parts I like first.
Okay.
I like the Chulder. I thought that the idea of these shape-shifting aliens who go around and basically cosplay in especially since they're murderous to do cosplay. I thought that was kind of a nice little twist. I like the fact that Rogue took his name from D&D. He was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and that's where he got his name from. Some of the music was good.
Costumes were interesting.
Jimmy.
the dancing was real. They were using actual dance moves that, are from English country dance. I'm an English country dance caller and dancer. So I was recognizing a lot of the moves they were doing. I didn't recognize any of the dances, which are put together from those moves, but it's like, okay, these are real moves. They were doing swirl siding, for example. Which is kind of where you get your shoulders together and then pivot to put your other shoulders together and go back. I thought it was interesting that they explained Ruby, who confessed she didn't know these dance moves. She learned them because of her psychic earrings that the Doctor had given her, and he just warned her, don't put them into battle mode, which will be a plot point for later. Because that's how she manages not to get killed by one of the Chulder, is she puts the earrings into battle mode and goes to town. There's some interesting stuff on the dialogue level. At one point, the Doctor is, after he tells her don't put the earrings into battle mode, he says, or act, because she's going off, to talk with the hostess of the party. He says, or accidentally invent tarmac. 1902 got away from me. And when in fact, tarmac was invented in 1902 in Nottinghamshire by their city council surveyor, Edgar Hooley. So that was a nice little historical touch. I at one point, the Doctor and Rogue are walking towards Rogue's cloaked spaceship, which looks kind of like a Klingon bird of prey. And they're walking past the Doctor's TARDIS, and Rogue refers to it as a shed, and which is a nice understanding for 1813. And the Doctor says, "Oh, love the shed." and so there's some nice stuff in it. The big thing. Oh, and I also liked when they have at the climax of the party, what the Chulder are planning on doing before they kill everybody is they're going to have a wedding. And so they talk to a vicar who's there, and he's got a great line of, "I cannot sanction wedlock for creatures from hell." Yeah. And then they kill him. So there's a lot of okay stuff in this. The big flaw is the Doctor romance thing. They've seeded little things before, like as early as Wild Blue Yonder, the 14th Doctor says, "Oh, is this who I am now?" After he notices that Isaac Newton is hot, in his view, because I didn't think he was hot, but okay, that's not who I am.
Yeah, that's not who I am.
Nope.
And then like last episode, the Doctor was a little attracted to Ricky September. And so they've been hinting around about the Doctor being either bisexual or gay or something like that in this incarnation. And as long as they keep it kind of at a low level, I find it watchable. But in this episode, they take it to a whole other level, and I'm not interested in watching that. Interestingly, this script is the only one other than Boom that is not written by Russell T Davies. And so it was written by a couple of other individuals. And so, but he did approve the script. And, frankly, I'm not into seeing flirty Doctor Who flirting with the same sex and then eventually kissing them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with almost everything you guys said. The writing in this episode is not great. It's very stilted, apart from a few quips, which were nice, which were probably added in by maybe Russell T Davies or one of the regular writers. There were way too many anachronistic references to modern TV. I mean, they mentioned Bridgerton, 5 times?
Yeah.
Which is a Netflix show that is
that
itself,
what it is?
It's a Netflix show that purports to depict Regency England. The writers clearly know nothing about Regency era, Jane Austen, that they didn't get from watching Bridgerton. I've never seen it. I know about it because it's, in the pop culture. But it is very sexual. There's lots of, it's famous for being very explicit in many ways. And so clearly that's where they were going with a lot of this. But it's just like, it was like not like there was so much that was just wrong from if you know anything about Regency culture, the upper classes, anything like that. It's just wrong.
Well,
so
they also mentioned, speaking of show reference, they also mentioned Strictly Come Dancing, which is a very popular, so I think So You Think You Can Dance, what they call it here in the States, or something like that,
Right. Or was it that or Strictly Ballroom? He just says Strictly. So I don't know. Yeah. There's a couple of shows like that. So that was really frustrating then the romance. The Doctor has had attractions before, has but never before I think has the Doctor had like fallen for someone to the point where he is proposing marriage or expects marriage to be proposed or is considering marriage with someone he's just met within the past hour.
Yeah.
It's just out of character. Like, even if it was a woman, it would be out of character for who we know the Doctor to be.
Yeah. Also, and he's also talking about how hot Rogue is. And again, I know this is not me, but I'm just not seeing it.
Right.
I do like,
which pops me out of the story. I mean, if it were a beautiful woman, I could say, oh yeah, she's hot, but I'm just not. What? And it just pops me out of the story.
So the actor is Jonathan Groff, who plays Rogue,
who's apparently someone.
Yeah, he was King George in Hamilton, the original cast of Hamilton. So he's done a few TV things too, but I enjoyed him in other things, and as a character, as an actor in this, he could have been fine. I didn't dislike him as a potential character, and we mentioned some of the things we liked about him, the super nerd reference that Doctor Who fans
D&D
would get to D&D. I like that, but
I mean, he really was. I think if Russell T Davies would have had his way, he would have been Captain Jack instead. But because of what John Barrowman did, he was actually rather abusive to people and showed things he shouldn't have been showing off. And he's basically been blacklisted.
Yeah,
I see.
Because of it. So but you could see, just thinking of it with that mindset, you look as like, this was written originally as a Captain Jack character.
That was in my notes. He's just another Captain Jack. Yeah.
And he really kind of is. And that's, it's like, we really didn't need the first Captain Jack. I'm on record as not a fan of Captain Jack Harkness. We didn't need a second one. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. There was actually another fun line where so one of the children assumes the form of Lord Barton, who's a bit of a cad, and he's trying to he's the Regency equivalent of hitting on Ruby, and she rejects him and walks away, calling him Lord Stilton, which was a nice. The Duchess spells it out for the rest of us, which is it's a difficult
cheese.
Difficult cheese. That's what that was.
Very strong.
Yes. So that I like that one. She also notices the portrait of the Duke's late mother, who is actress Susan Twist. So that's our reference, and more discussion of who is this woman that we keep seeing. So we've been building up the recognition. All right. Yeah. So clearly that's going to be fulfilled next episode.
Yep.
Yeah.
There is a scene on Rogue's ship where he thinks the Doctor is the Childer, and he's got him immobilized. And
this is kind of a nice moment because his computer confirms the Doctor is a shapeshifter.
Right. Yeah.
Only it's his regenerations. He's not shapeshifting all the time.
Right.
Yes.
And so the Doctor has to prove to him, I'm not that kind of shapeshifter.
In fact, the first thing that the computer does is show his most recent form, which was the 14th Doctor, David Tennant. And then so the Doctor has to say, no, these are all my forms. And then we see nice holograms of all the Doctor's known incarnations, including the War Doctor, the 8th Doctor, the Fugitive Doctor, and the Richard E. Grant Doctor from Scream of the Shalka.
I missed that his was on there. I missed that one. That's great.
I didn't notice that. It's not all the incarnations, though, because we don't see the Morbius Doctors, for example, or the Timeless Children.
Right. We just see the ones who've been regular on screen in a prominent portion. So it it was interesting to see them do that.
So speaking of that scene where the Doctor's playing with you're wired for sound, and he starts playing music.
Yeah.
It's Can't Get You Out of My Head by Kylie Minogue, who was Astrid on Voyage of the Damned. So there's a callback.
That is the connection. That's right. That was funny. I liked the way he kept turning the music on no matter what Rogue did to turn it off. I thought
he basically had to unplug the stereo to get it stopped, playing.
Yeah. The Family of Childers, it reminded me a lot of Family of Blood, which was the 11th Doctor story.
And they do something.
Doctor. Yeah.
They do something to them, kind of like the Family of Blood. They basically teleport them to where they can't harm anybody, and that's like what the 10th Doctor did with the Family of Blood. Only he put them in very different places that were much darker.
Right. They wanted to live forever. They wanted eternity. That's why they were hunting him down, the Doctor down. And so he put them in places where they could live for eternity. One of them in a painting, one of them surrounding a black hole. Yeah.
So we have this trap, that's this tripartite trap that they have to adjust. And we get to a point where we create the artificial constraint where in order to trap 6, we have to, it can only ever be used once, that whole thing. But there was this weird moment when they were all trapped in it, the family and Ruby, because she had pretended to be the other Childer. At no point does she try to hint to the Doctor, I'm really Ruby, not this Childer. Like, it was weird. And then instead of Rogue grabbing the actual Childer and replacing Ruby with her, which is he replaces himself after the other Childer is in the trap. You know what I mean? It's like this weird, like, he knows Ruby is there. Why didn't he just switch her with the Childer?
Because you got Chekhov's 6. He set it for 6 people, so you had to have 6 people on there.
Yeah, I mean, you had to have the idea is it was a poor writing so that they could have this moment where the Doctor has to send the love of his life into another dimension,
and the Doctor doesn't. He ends up taking the controller and doing it himself.
Right.
Yeah. Also, another flaw, I think, with the Childer is they're also different from each other. I mean, they're in their native form, or what's apparently their native form. They're these bird people, but they all look so different. And I don't think they're all equally convincing. If this was like I don't know if they're meant to be a family like the family of blood, but I thought they should have looked. I think they should have had a more consistent look.
Mm.
I would assume if they're talking a wedding that this would be multiple families involved or whatever. But yeah, there's one of them, the one that became the vicar. He looked like a Muppet.
Yeah, the one with the blue head,
blue and the big bushy eyebrows. Yeah, he looked like a Muppet. So the other one's the one that the Countess or
the Duchess.
She was
fine.
She looked good.
You know, it is weird. Speaking of the vicar, that the whole point was cosplay, but yet when he replaces the vicar, he doesn't put on the vicar's appearance. He just put on the vicar's clothes, and it's like they stopped pretending to be the people, and I was like, well, I don't understand. Like, it just seemed inconsistent with the point of the story.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I did like the line he had when he started the wedding. You know, we're here for this unholy alliance, something. You know, it's like he even calls it unholy.
Right. There is also another scene back on Rogue's ship where the Doctor and Rogue are kind of bonding over the fact that they've lost people. We don't find out who Rogue has lost, but he's lost people. And they kind of talk about, well, why do we go on? And it's kind of a nice moment. We have to live each day because they can't, because they have died. And so there's a bit of a moment of shared grief and an explanation of how they overcome their grief. Like we continue to live because the people we love that we've lost can't, and so we live for them, or something along those lines. So there was that there. Okay. That's about all I have on Rogue. I mean, we talked about what we disliked about it, and I'm not going to disagree. And honestly, I'm not interested in a Doctor Who series that's about that.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I was afraid when Russell T Davies came back, because I mean, he's always been known for promoting LGBT issues very strongly, and when he came off of other between the two runs, he had many other programs that focused exclusively on that. I was like, okay, an episode like this is going to come out. So
yeah, hopefully it'll be the only one. And I'm not big on alleged rumors, leaks, stuff like that, because they frequently turn out to be not true.
Right.
But there is one guy that seems to me to have some initial credibility, who has reportedly who talks regularly about knowing people within who are connected to Disney. And because of the ratings for the current Doctor Who series, which it hasn't connected with fans the way they hoped. They're not terrible, but they're not good either. And things like this, in prior episodes nothing was this extreme,
right? But
this is part of what's not connecting with fans. And according to this guy, who's not himself even a Doctor Who fan, Russell T Davies' role is going to be shifting in the show because of pushback from Disney. For the money they've put into this, they want more results that have been forthcoming. And so we may find, even though it'll be delayed because season 2 is basically filmed at this point, it looks like there may be a course correction in the show, which is not unprecedented. It's like when they introduced Peter Capaldi and he was way too alienating his first season, and then they course corrected.
Yeah. BBC owns Doctor Who. Disney doesn't, but Disney is putting up most of the money for production. So if Disney asks the BBC to shift things, it's likely to get a strong hearing.
Money is a very strong vote. Let's put it that way. And there is a lot of Disney money in this. The fact that when you see the end credits, you got the BBC and the Disney logo right next to each other. They're on equal ground as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. And without getting too much into politics, Disney seems to be course correcting a lot of things similar to this in a lot of the products.
Because they've been alienating a lot of fans and they've been losing a lot of money.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's really, they're a business. That's what it comes down to. So we shall see. We shall see. So, yeah. Like you mentioned, Jimmy, season 2 is just finished filming. So who knows if we'll see anything from that.
By the way, speaking of Disney, this last weekend I watched, for the first time, I had not seen it before, but I watched Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is the second of the Spider-Verse films. I'd seen the first one and loved it, but it'd been several years. And I finally got around to watching the second one. And I watched it, and it's Spider-Man. I'm thinking, oh, how could Disney possibly produce something this good? Because it was really, really, really good.
Yep.
And then after it was over, I looked up. Oh, it's Sony.
It's Sony.
Yeah.
Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man.
That's how Disney was able to produce something that good. They didn't.
Exactly.
Yes, Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man on the screen and rents him back to Disney for the Marvel movies. But yeah, you're right.
So just a couple small things. First of all, we get another hint for whoever this one who waits. Rogue says when he first captured the Doctor that he needed to do more paperwork due to the new boss.
No, the boss has been, and there's a question about, is the one who waits and the boss the same person, or are they different?
Yeah. So there's that, because the term boss has been used before. I think Maestro used it, and I can't remember if the toy maker did. And then speaking again, talking about music, as the Doctor lets Rogue in, and he's walking and he's singing Pure Imagination from the original Willy Wonka movie.
Right. And I'm more and more, I feel like Ruby is somehow closely connected to the one who waits, whether she is the one who waits in some way or is a relation to. It just feels
I don't
like that to
see
me.
her being if she was the one who waits, you would think the Maestro would recognize that. Now the Maestro did say something about, you've got a song within you. There's something, there's something different about you. Being connected, I could see, or being kind of the counter maybe to the one who waits.
Yeah.
So while we're kind of speculating about stuff that's going to come out next episode, so we know based on the preview that the Susan Twist thing comes forward to the front.
Yes.
And I saw a teaser video with Russell T Davies where he said, if you go back and watch The Giggle, there's this moment where Mel is talking to Donna, and Donna asks, is your system, I forget, duotronic or polytronic or something like that? And Mel, the computer programmer, says it's a triad. And so next week we're getting Triad Technologies. And apparently the name of the woman in charge is going to be Susan Triad or something like that. And it's played by Susan Twist. And it's been commonly noted, okay, number one, Susan Twist shows up wherever the TARDIS has landed in some form. And S Triad, which is part of the Triad Technologies logo. S Triad is an anagram of TARDIS. And so she may be something that the TARDIS is projecting into these environments. I also suspect that Susan Twist is, whoever her base personality is may be innocent in these situations, because there's a line in the teaser about she feels like these dreams are real. And so I suspect she may be experiencing these other lives as dreams, and she may not have known either. Right. Why do I keep seeing this Doctor and Ruby? So she may be just as confused about all that. On the other hand, in the preview video, they show a shift in image of her, and in one version, she looks like she's got some kind of headdress involving horns, and in another, she looks kind of like a cyborg. So these may be other alternate versions of her. And I've seen it speculated that she may be connected with Sutek, because you've got her name, Sue, and she's the head of a tech company. So maybe it's Sutek.
What's
Pyramid of Mars.
Pyramids of Mars. Fourth Doctor story where this ancient Greek Egyptian god Set,
Mhm.
who's called Sutek in the story, was
Right.
like crushing the Doctor, so to speak. Also, Russell T Davies has said there's something from the third Doctor's time that's going to be appearing next week.
Interesting.
And it's the first part of a two-parter that rolls into it's called The Legend of Ruby Sunday, and it rolls into the second part, which is called The Empire of Death. So
Interesting.
just some thoughts for next time.
Looking forward.
All right. So, any other thoughts on Rogue before we get to the rest of our feedback?
Nothing else here.
It's over.
Yeah.
Yes, moving on. All right. So our feedback this is feedback on 73 yards. Amy on YouTube writes, "Stand firm, Father Corey. This episode was horror and not everything is always explained. It's more effective if the viewer has to use his or her imagination. Nothing Russell T Davies could have had the 73 yards woman say would have been as effective as not specifying what she said. It makes it creepier. But I also see where Dom and Jimmy are coming from, because the explanations we do get feel rushed, and the episode stops more than it concludes. This felt more like Turn Left than Midnight, and I wish that was brought up in your review. Turn Left, where the companion has to live a desolate life without the Doctor. That episode did tie into the larger plot, and I assume 73 yards will too."
Yeah.
You're right, Amy. I thought about Turn Left while I was watching 73 yards and forgot to make a note of it.
Well, I agree. It's a similar plot. Though I made the comparison to Midnight because, again, it's one of these episodes I think is going to be compared in that realm. Maybe not as good, but definitely in that realm as
Right.
Midnight and Turn Left and some of these other really good episodes.
And then Jason on Facebook says, "Has anyone noticed that every episode this series has had a title drop? That is, someone on the episode says the episode title."
Yep. Noticed that.
Yeah, I mean, clearly in Rogue, they say his name at one point.
And
but
Space Babies. I mean, Ncuti Gatwa says that about a jillion times.
right. Every episode has,
And Dot and Bubble, that's another one that was pretty obvious because that's how they activate their social media.
73 yards, Boom, and and Maestro. Let's see, Flying Car
The
100.
Devil's Cord.
The Devil's Cord, right. Yeah, that comes up. Flying Car 100 says, "I assume they weren't doing it on purpose, but the 73 yards is 66.751 meters, which is kind of close to 66.6. So could they have been going for a 666 thing?"
I don't think so. If he wanted to do that, because meters are commonly used in the UK, if he wanted, he could have said 66.6 meters.
Yeah.
And if that's what they were going for, they could have easily done that. Russell T Davies apparently measured how far away you need to be in order for someone to be kind of recognizable, but not really.
Mhm.
And he measured it as 73 yards. And so that's where that comes from.
Probably with 20/20 vision.
Oh, that's actually they mentioned that like when you would get up close and take a picture, it would only show up on the camera as if you're standing 73 yards away with 20/20 vision and see them.
Suitably creepy. Let's see. Doug's Film and TV comments, "Good review of 73 yards. I will say this is Millie Gibson's best story as Ruby. I wonder if we're going to find out what the old Ruby said in the series finale. If not, I'm fine with it. I will say this, the actor that played Roger Ap Gwilliam looked like Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and I'm wondering if Russell was making fun of him. I don't know if the three of you picked up on that."
It's possible. I did kind of notice a similarity. It's possible.
Yeah.
Though I think Russell T Davies would agree more with Justin Trudeau's politics. So I don't know if you want to make too much fun of him.
Yeah. Don H. in Cincinnati sent in an email. He said, "I found it refreshing that you actually disagreed about something. Should they have said what the old Ruby was saying or not? It created an interesting discussion between you all, and in my book, that's what a good show does. Also, I've listened to many Doctor Who podcasts, but found yours to be the most enjoyable. Keep up the good work." Thanks, Don.
I'm sorry, I disagree.
Well, Jimmy, you're wrong. All right. And then Ross on YouTube writes, "I had similar thoughts about things going unanswered, but in a different way. I think some of Ruby's nature will explain what she was saying. It may even be an element of her nature." I think he means like true nature, an ability to drive people away, which was enhanced in later life. However, I do wish more was explained about the magic behind the time loop fairy circle. One of the major features of the Doctor Who series is the Doctor tends to think through problems or outthink his opponents. It felt like something was missing when Ruby only barely managed to understand how to utilize her shadow to achieve her goal, but never understood the nature of the time loop. That's where it broke down for me. Yes, her social isolation was an interesting theme to explore, but it felt lacking as an episode without an intellectual win.
I think that kind of shows how Ruby basically had to struggle through all of this through her life. So, I mean, I don't expect her to be able to get that intellectual understanding that the Doctor would have had.
I also think it's this whole series leaning into the fairy tale aspect that we brought up before, where things don't make sense. They make fairy tale sense. They don't make scientific sense. So I think that's part of it too. And
it didn't help much. The ones who could have helped her get that intellectual understanding was Unit. And of course, Unit immediately runs away.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Stotzi has a comment. Excellent review, gentlemen. This was quite the story. And I agree with Dom and Jimmy. The entire story revolved around the big mystery of who the old woman was, yet didn't come close to any kind of explanation. I'm all for a little unanswered things, but in this case, it was crucial to the story, but it could have gone a bit more into the actual why. It was nice to see the woman in the pub again. She was in the Torchwood episode Countryside, a truly unnerving story. I do think the pub scene was longer than it needed to be. £5 for a Coke? Insanity. Cheers, guys.
Yeah.
Well, Jimmy, I think that's from all that inflation the government has caused.
Yeah. and by the way, if you want to see the cheers and boos, if you're not watching on YouTube, you'll have to watch the YouTube version where we're rating people's opinions on our disagreement.
Yeah. If they agree with me and Jimmy, I cheer.
Dom and I are.
Yeah. And if they agree with Father Corey, he cheers. David sent in an email. Hello, gentlemen. Just listening to your 73 Yards episode. A theory. When the people talk to the old woman, they turn and run. The Toymaker says he saw the one who waits and he ran. Is the old woman not only Ruby, but also the one who waits? And we kind of talked about that a little bit already, but the true nature of Ruby.
I doubt it, but it's possible.
Yep. And then finally, Ronnie sent in an email and is saying, I was hoping this was going to be a positive podcast. Sadly, way too negative. Jimmy seems to be hate watching the show. Very disappointed.
Nope. I'm not hate watching it. I'm just being honest about. I've been watching this show for years and years, and there are things I appreciate about it. Just like in today's episode, I appreciated Dot and Bubble way more than I appreciated Rogue.
Yep.
Yeah, there was some criticism.
Even in Rogue, there were things I appreciated.
Right. So I had some criticism of me for my opinion. I posted online, and like, well, why you hate everything? No, it's just that. There's some things I like, some things I don't like. You know, people can have opinions. It's okay to have an opinion, to not love everything. People, but I'm also willing to let people like the things that they like. So it's not
mileage may vary.
Yep.
Exactly.
And Dom and I can attest that Jimmy doesn't hate watch anything. We're going to be soon. We'll be recording the kind of a season recap of Star Trek Discovery, and Jimmy won't be joining us because Jimmy has decided, nah.
Yeah. Then that's fine.
That's great. That's fine.
If you don't like anything, we won't watch it. We won't talk about it. All right. So that's all of our feedback. That's a lot of feedback. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. We really do appreciate that. So now we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Ricky S., Michael D., Jeanette G., G. William P., and Joshua B. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give.
Dom, did you say that Ricky S. was one of our sponsors?
Oh my gosh, it's Ricky September. Yes.
Wow.
Thank you, Ricky. No, different Ricky, but yes, nice coincidence. That's it from us. We would love to hear your feedback on what we discussed or what you thought of Dot and Bubble and Rogue. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com, the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. Visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or watch us on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. And Be sure to leave a comment there after liking and subscribing. We'll be back next time when we will be discussing the penultimate episode, The Legend of Ruby Sunday. Until then, Jimmy Yakin, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom, and I gotta go make it snow now.
And Father Corey Stika, thank you as well.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest, and remember, the weather report says it's another glorious day in fine time. In theory.